Aoife Doyle present. Aoife is presenting on Zvatinoda, What We Want, Feasibility Study of a Youth-Led Mobile Phone Intervention to Improve Demand for and Provision of Youth Sexual and Reproductive Health Services in Zimbabwe. And I hope I said that word correctly. I believe it's Shona.
Yeah,
No?
I don't know if I can say it properly, but I'm sure some colleagues here will help us. Okay, hi everyone, I'm Aoife. It's a real pleasure to be here and present Zvatinoda on behalf of all these colleagues that you see here. So I don't need to tell you much about this, you know, but young people do have a low uptake of essential health services. And so we wanted to see what we could do around this, and we worked in Chitungwiza, which is a peri-urban area of relatively low socioeconomic status near Harare. So our aim was to co-create an intervention to increase young people's demand for and use of reproductive and other essential health services, and to also increase the availability of high-quality youth-friendly health services. So this was an innovative project trying to address this age-old problem of, like, how can we help young people to engage with services, and how can those services be friendly for them? So this was our project plan. First, we undertook some co-creation, so developing the intervention. The background was that Aoife, who was the implementing partner, had previously had a model where they had worked on WhatsApp with an auntie for some discussion groups. We were interested in adapting this for adolescents. We got some research funding to do this, and so the first step was obviously community sensitization. We formed a youth advisory panel, and it was quite an innovative way that this was formed, where the community, it was in a really participatory way, and the youth nominated themselves and then deselected themselves as other young people spoke, and it was really interesting approach that they took. And then there was community mapping and some workshops to understand what were the real issues around health service access. Following that, there was additional participatory work with a broader range of young people, and thinking about, okay, if we were to do these discussion groups on mobile phones, how would that work? And then I'll tell you a little bit more about the intervention on the next slide. And then we undertook a pilot intervention, which I'm going to talk about the findings today. And then we fed back these messages to stakeholders. Our timeline was a little bit delayed due to COVID, like many of the projects that have taken place over the last few years. So what the intervention involved were groups of young people engaged together on mobile phones over a 12-week period, and they talked about different health topics every week. The health topics, as I mentioned on the previous slide, were selected by the young people themselves. The original plan was generally sexual reproductive health, but the topics that emerged were mostly SRH, but included other things like young people's relationships, drug and alcohol use, mental health, hygiene. We included something on COVID because it was topical at the time. So they talked about this within their groups with a facilitator. We used this platform called Rocket Chat. Why did we use Rocket Chat? Because WhatsApp was through discussion with not only the funders, but also the Ethic Review Board for the purposes of a research project. It didn't have the level of confidentiality and safety that would be required. So Rocket Chat is a platform where you lock, basically the only people can access are that small group of people. And it's all anonymous, so nobody sees your phone number, you just have a nickname or something. So it gets rid of that issue. At the end of each week, we had expert guests. So they were maybe someone from the local family planning association or another local expert who would come and answer questions in an expert session. And apart from this sort of collaboration with the young people, one of the main things we were trying to do was get young people to say, well, what do they want in terms of services, and how can we summarize that, and how can we share that with the service providers? So this is an example of these one-pagers that were produced on each topic. Obviously, you can't read the detail, but what they want in this pink box in the top there is, kind and caring healthcare workers who, don't treat them badly because they're sexually active. They suggested testing in the community by young people, so HIV self-testing, but also mentioned that some people prefer testing in the health facility with blood testing because they thought that was more accurate. So these are the kind, and at the bottom, young people's commitments. So they, as a group, were then to commit to what they would do, and this related, in this case, to like committing to testing for HIV, committing to asking healthcare workers about testing, etc. So we did a mixed methods process evaluation. So it was a small study with 4 groups of 7 participants. We used a RE-AIM framework, which is a framework which looks at reach, effectiveness, adoption, implementation, and maintenance. Our methods were in-depth interviews with both participants and facilitators. We also analyzed the chat discussion, which was anonymized. We did a pre-post self-completed questionnaire for the group participants, and we also had notes from debrief meetings and technical challenges. We did a qualitative thematic analysis using deductive themes from that framework. So in terms of reach, we obviously had 28 participants, but we did manage to get a diverse group of participants. So even though it was a quite small project, the potential for a much larger and diverse reach is there. The stakeholder engagement on the youth-led feedback was really quite impressive, but of course it was quite novel and I guess for some people a bit contentious, but it was an initial effort to try to build bridges between these two populations. So there was a real thirst for knowledge, and young people reported that their knowledge improved and that they were really happy about that. And they really valued the interaction with other young people, which was mentioned in some of the earlier sessions. So in this example, I was afraid to go and get tested. When I heard others say that they had to go and get tested, I then decided to go and get tested. And interestingly for us, as we started thinking, originally planning to use WhatsApp, they really did value the privacy, so the use of these pseudonyms, so nobody used their real name on the platform, but they felt that that gave them an extra confidence to talk about some of these more challenging issues. So just some sort of descriptive findings, so from our pre-post questionnaire. So the average age was 20. We purposefully selected the young people so that there would be a balance with gender, in and out of school, HIV status. So knowledge improved between baseline and endline, which was something quite positive. And these highlighted ones on menstruation and HIV treatment were the ones where knowledge was lowest at the beginning and then increased at the end. But we measured other things like confidence to communicate about SRH topics, and there was some evidence that this was also increasing. So I feel able to start a conversation with older adults in my family about SRH. This improved for both males and females. So we asked, at the end in the post-survey, we asked the participants, were there, like, have you made any changes to your life since joining the group? And we had a series of options, and the ones that emerged with most positive responses were that they felt more supported in decision-making, some safer sexual practices, better communication with their sexual partner, and self-efficacy around health service use. So they felt more able to attend a health facility when they needed care. So in terms of adoption, participation was good but variable. Sorry. So there was a lot of network challenges. So despite having phones and having the application network, as many of us know, can be a challenge. The really innovative and nice thing about that project is this youth advisory panel really led the planning of it. They led many design aspects, so the curriculum, the logo, how the data would be analyzed and how it would be fed back. And as mentioned earlier in one of the sessions, I think they also really needed and appreciated our project coordinator Privilege, who was the older, knowledgeable auntie, who was always on hand to sort of support them, joined occasionally the groups for listening in and helping. So that was an important component as well. So we had planned a regular feedback to service providers throughout the intervention. Unfortunately, this was not possible due to COVID. What we did manage to do was have a couple of workshops with health system and community stakeholders. The young people, the youth advisory panel wrote a song of their own bat, and we got some funding to make a video of it. And the link's on the last slide. And we had these one-page summaries, which we are planning to disseminate more broadly. You'll see here in the picture one of our YAP, Jonah, who's presenting to a group like this, maybe 100 people. So there was a lot of interaction in that way. Thank you. So there was, people reported quite positive sort of potential long-term impact on their life. This is a quote from one of the advisory panel. But one interesting thing which came out of it was that they suggested maybe to improve engagement in over this period of 12 weeks, maybe after 5 or 6 weeks, maybe like physical meetings would be better. So this speaks to some of the points that were made earlier. So just to summarize, this pilot intervention was acceptable and feasible. It really does show promise for improving knowledge and potentially health-seeking behaviors. And some of the methods that we used in this study are being incorporated into other work that we're doing in Zimbabwe. For example, the White Check study, which is a health and well-being checkup visit for adolescents, which involves a lot of participatory research and development, and Aoife's large HIV programs in collaboration with PEPFAR and USAID. So I guess it's a nice example of where research can feed immediately into programming, but also into additional research. So we're hoping to do some more research on this. Obviously, this was just the first step, maybe some in-person discussions once the virtual group has bonded, and then thinking through how do you feed back to healthcare providers in a useful way. So thank you very much for listening. And just to acknowledge our partners and our funders, which is the UK MRC. Thank you.